You ever have one of those moments that just doesn't make any sense? A strange light in the sky, the feeling of a ghostly presence, or maybe even that bizarre sensation that you floated right out of your own body. Well, today, we're going to get into a pretty wild and maybe a little unsettling scientific explanation for some of the most profound experiences people have ever had.
Just imagine that for a second. That feeling. A total separation of you from, well, you. And this isn't from some sci-fi movie. It's a real person describing a very real out-of-body experience. And here's the crazy part. This kind of thing, it's way more common than you'd think.
Yeah, get this. According to Gallup polls, up to 1 in 5 Americans says they've had some kind of mystical experience. We're talking near-death events, out-of-body moments, the whole deal. That's literally millions of people who have felt something far beyond our normal, everyday reality.
So that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? For centuries, this has been the stuff of religion, folklore, and, of course, UFO theories. But what if the answer wasn't out there in the stars or in some other dimension? What if it was deep inside our own heads, and even deeper, in the very ground beneath our feet?
Okay, so before we get into the brain science, let's just talk about the experiences themselves. You know, the strange lights people see and that eerie feeling that someone else is in the room.
Look, this stuff is nothing new. Go to any culture, any time in history, and you will find these stories. Tales of mysterious lights dancing in the sky, encounters with angels or gods, or just that powerful, unmistakable feeling that you are not alone.
And this is where a neuroscientist named Michael Persinger comes in with this totally radical idea. He looked at all these reports, especially the big waves of UFO sightings, and he suggested the source wasn't from outer space, it was geophysical. The answer was literally right under our feet the whole time.
So this is the heart of his idea. When tectonic plates are grinding against each other, that immense stress can create what are called piezoelectric effects. Basically, the rocks are under so much pressure, they generate electrical charges and even light that shoots up into the atmosphere. So we might be seeing UFOs that are actually created by a totally natural geological process.
And the wild thing is how perfectly these characteristics line up with UFO reports. You know, glowing orbs, often seen near fault lines. Persinger actually found that when seismic activity spiked, you'd see a big jump in UFO sightings right along with it. The correlation was just too strong to ignore.
All right, so strange lights in the sky could be geology. Fine. But what about the feeling, the sensed presence, the out-of-body stuff? I mean, how could grinding rocks possibly affect our consciousness? Well, the answer might lie in a hidden sense our brains have, a magnetic sense.
And this is where it gets really weird. See, the Earth has its own natural electromagnetic field, and it pulses at a frequency of around 7 to 8 hertz. And guess what? The operating frequency of our own brains, especially when we're relaxed or meditating, is also right around 7 to 8 hertz. It's like our brains and the entire planet are tuned to the exact same radio station.
So Persinger's big idea was that our brains, and specifically the temporal lobes, those parts right above your ears that handle memory, emotion, and what we're sensing, are super sensitive to these weak magnetic fields. They can be influenced by them, and that influence can trigger some pretty strange experiences.
Okay, so this is where the theory gets put to the ultimate test. If natural magnetic fields from the Earth can cause these experiences, could Persinger actually create them in his lab on purpose? This question led to one of the most famous and, most controversial experiments in all of neuroscience.
The setup was actually pretty simple. He'd have volunteers sit in a chamber in total silence, total darkness, so they could really focus inward. Then, he'd put this modified helmet on them. It was fitted with these little electromagnets, and it would send weak, specially patterned magnetic fields right at their temporal lobes. And the fields were super weak, no stronger than an old computer monitor, but the pattern was everything.
So what happened? It worked. I mean, it really worked. A staggering 80% of the people who sat in that chair reported feeling a sensed presence, that unmistakable feeling that they were not alone.
This is like the classic report people gave. This feeling of a presence, and it was often on their left side. Persinger figured this was because stimulating the right side of the brain caused the left hemisphere, our sense of self, to interpret its own activity as a separate person.
Wild, right?
And it wasn't just feeling a presence. People would feel these powerful, raw emotions just appear out of nowhere. The psychologist Susan Blackmore, who tried the helmet herself, talked about these sudden waves of intense anger.
And then this deep, horrible fear, for absolutely no reason. The helmet was directly tapping into the brain's emotional centers.
And this is the real kicker. He could even create that out-of-body experience. Just by changing the magnetic fields a little, he could make people feel like they were floating, watching themselves from a distance, just like that skydiver we talked about at the very beginning.
So, what in the world does all this mean? If you can make someone feel the presence of God with a magnet, does that make the experience any less real? Well, this is where Persinger's work points to a really important distinction.
The sensation, that feeling of a presence, that's a very real biological event happening in the brain. But the label we put on it, an angel, a ghost, an ancestor, an alien, that part is all about our personal beliefs and our culture. The experience is universal. The story we tell ourselves about it is not.
And that's the profound paradox that Persinger left us with. He never once said these experiences weren't real. For the person having them, they feel more real than anything. His work just suggests that the source of that powerful reality might not be out there, but deep inside our own incredible, complex brains.
Now, this doesn't automatically disprove God or ghosts or aliens, but it does force us to ask a really tough question. It suggests that the wiring for mystical, spiritual experience is built right into our biology, just waiting for the right trigger, whether that trigger is a sacred ritual, a tectonic fault line, or a scientist's helmet. And what that means for our deepest beliefs? Well, that's something we're thinking about.